This episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Oshala Farm. They grow and sell over 80 medicinal plant species that they grow on their beautiful and vibrant certified organic farm based in Southern Oregon. So if you're looking to purchase organic herbs grown right here in the United States, definitely check out Oshala Farm at oshalafarm.com. They also sell things like elixirs, fire cider, body care products, etc. That's oshalafarm.com. And big thanks to them for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. What's up, Herbalists? This is Mason, and you're listening to Herb Rally. Today's episode is yet another edition of the Herbalist Hour, and this time I'm joined by my good friend, Christina Sanchez. In this conversation, we chat about her abuela and the influence she had on her, what draws Christina to the desert and its medicine, saving Joshua trees as well as cats, what it's like hosting herb walks through AirBnB, tortoises, advice to the budding herbalist, and a ton more. I always enjoy catching up with Christina. Actually, last year we were able to drive through Southern California and hang out with her at her beautiful home located near Joshua Tree. She's just a great human, great herbalist, and she's always such a joy to hang out with. So I know you're going to absolutely love this conversation. You can learn more about Christina and her work at everyleafspeaks.org, and I will leave a link in today's podcast show notes, of course, as per usual. Also, before we get into the show, I'd love to shout out and thank Rue383638 for their podcast review. This was an Apple podcast, and I actually just recently discovered how to look at Canadian reviews and reviews from the UK. I was only seeing reviews from the United States at first, so I've got a few upcoming reviews that I'd like to shout out before the upcoming shows. And this one, as I mentioned, was from Rue383638, and they say, "Love it. Great podcast with a great variety of information." So thank you so much, Rue, for taking the time to leave that review. Definitely one of our goals is to have lots of different herbalists and topics, etc. So your finger's on the pulse. Really appreciate the kind review and for taking the time to leave the review as well. So, dear listener, if you don't mind, could you pretty please leave us some sort of written review and star ranking in your podcast player of choice? 5 stars would be awesome. So, also, before we begin with the show, shout out and big thanks to all of our Herb Rally Schoolhouse members. You know who you are. We really could not do this without you all, so thank you so much. If you'd like to learn more about the Herb Rally Schoolhouse and what it is, you could go to herbrally.com/schoolhouse. It's $10 a month, but if you want to get your first 30 days for free, you could use coupon code PODCAST at checkout. We've got a couple upcoming classes. Next week, we're hosting a good friend of Herb Rally, Abby Artemisia. She's going to be teaching the botany of rose for herbalists. I will leave a link in today's podcast show notes as well if you'd like to sign up for that for free. And anyone can attend for free, but then it's going to be available to all of our Herb Rally Schoolhouse members after the fact. So one more time, if you'd like to support Herb Rally, go to herbrally.com/schoolhouse, use coupon code podcast at checkout to get your first 30 days for free, and check out that recording of Abby Artemisia's Botany of the Rose Family webinar. Okay, that's going to do it for my rambling today. Hope you enjoyed today's episode with none other than my good friend, Christina Sanchez. You're going to love this one. Talk to you very, very soon. Bye.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm incredibly excited to have on my good friend, herbalist and ecologist, amongst many other things, Christina Sanchez. Welcome to the show, Christina.
Thank you. Hi, it's good to be back.
Don't usually start the show this way, but I figure a good way to open up this show is how you doing and what you've been up to lately.
Well, I've been busy. Been well, thank you. Lately, I've just been teaching a lot of workshops while I'm not. Season has just begun, but while I am out of season, my work season in the field, I just host a lot of workshops. Herbalism workshops. I do a lot of naturalist hikes. I teach a lot of field work where people get to make herbal medicine in the field. None of it's wildcrafted. This is stuff that I provide, a lot of stuff that I've grown. Or I also host Airbnb experiences for the high desert and in the Joshua Tree National Park and also in Pipes Canyon. So I've just been busy teaching people about the desert and conservation in terms of why we should be protecting our not only our earth, but it's, the deserts as well. It's very crucial.
Absolutely. And I do want to get more into the Airbnb experience later. I want to dive into that because I'm really curious about it. And I think the audience could get a lot of value out of it. Maybe them themselves would be open to hosting those types of experiences as well. But we before we get into that, let's take it back a little bit. I'd love to hear about your abuela, her influence on you, if she's actually influenced any of your herbal work, but maybe how she's influenced you just in life in general, or culinarily, if you will. And I remember when we visited you, where you live in the desert, Southern California, you brought her up a couple times, and she just seemed like an awesome lady. So, could you tell us about your abuela and her influence on you?
So yes, my grandmother, my abuela, she passed away many years ago when I was in my 20s. I wish she could have been here today to see what I've done. A lot of family members say that I remind them of her because of the way that she works with plants. She was an amazing gardener. I have hear stories of how my family, my aunts, my uncles talk about how she used to take them up to the mountains, which is a chaparral here in Southern California, to harvest white sage because she used to work with white sage a lot. Back then it wasn't such a concern, but she would use this as medicine. My family lived pretty much in the remote area in the eastern Coachella Valley, very south, going towards Mexicali. And they lived off the land. They had a ranch. They harvested their own meat. They had crops that would grow every year. And so she was constantly working with the earth and medicine. And one of the plants that she worked a lot with was creosote bush, Larrea trinitata. In Spanish, my family calls it gobrandora. And so she would use that in herbal medicine. My aunt told me how like she would put the stems of the Larrea into the shoes of the kids because their feet are stinky. So she would use it as a deodorizer. And then also because it's so aromatic, she used to make a tea with it and like soak their feet because it's also antifungal. And she would also soak their nasty shoes in there if they had a little funk to it. And so I tried that one year, not on my feet, but on Howie's. Well, he gets after backpacking for a while. And so anyway, but I did soak the boots in there, did what my grandmother did, and it actually worked. So all you need to do is like make a nice tea, fill it up in a Home Depot bucket, throw some shoes in there if you got some stink going on, or soak your feet. It really does work. And I let it sit out there for about a week, and then the shoes were brand new again. So yeah, I definitely, in terms of working with the earth, working with plants, I do focus what's around me within my region. I also do cook a lot with the plants. I don't know necessarily the recipes. I mean, she taught me how to cook when I was younger, like making mole and working with nopales. Nopales was a big thing that my grandmother worked with. And there's so many people in my family that don't like it. And I'm one of them that just loves the nopales. I just, everything, I put it on my skin, my hair, I eat it. I make tea with the nopal, the prickly pear pad. I should say nopales is prickly pear cactus. And also, I use the fruit when it's in season. And I found a trick that if you can freeze the fruit. So if you have a big harvest on your land, that you've cultivated of the cactus and you can't use that all up right away. Yeah. If you've got a deep freezer, put them in there. They're good for a while. But yeah, so I do remember a lot of like the way she would cook, and I do cook a lot of Mexican food, healthier though. I don't use lard.
Sure.
I don't eat tortillas like I used to. But yeah, she has influenced my work, and I often feel her presence with me, and I wish she could be here today to see what I'm doing.
Did she grow up kind of where you're at right now?
No, so my grandmother's from Chihuahua, Mexico, and so they lived in Texas, and then they settled in Oasis, California. That's like the southern eastern Coachella Valley. So that's where they're at. And then as my grandparents got sick, they moved up a little bit north near Bakersfield. Gotcha. And they passed away and they're buried there. But I still have family that lives all over the Coachella Valley.
So it sounds like prickly pear, the nopales are growing, they're ubiquitous where you live as well as Texas. And so it's similar ecology though, right?
Yeah, you could, of course, there's going to be more a species that you want to work with more.
Hmm.
You tend to work with essentially spineless variety, which is Opuntia fiscus indica. And the species that I have here, the Opuntia hybridizes. And so it's really
Mm.
hard sometimes you might get a new species that happens.
Oh,
So
wow.
the species that I have about 4 different non-native species that I have cultivated. Some
Mm.
folks that gave me, some of their Opuntias, or my mother, I have harvested some from her garden, and it's completely lining. I have it as a living fence,
Wow.
and I use it as medicine and food, and I tend to them, and so yeah, you can use them interchangeably.
Is there
I
any worry about like over harvesting or anything like that, or they're just so common that it's not a big deal?
I would not harvest the native Opuntia.
Gotcha.
So because this is a thing. When you're out in the desert, you'll realize that it's very arid. That's what makes it desert. It's the aridity,
Mm.
and you get these wildlife and the rodents, the critters that, when it's summer and we are like lacking rain and there's no wildflowers and there's nothing, necessarily fruiting that would provide food source for them. Opuntia cactus species are a source of moisture because of the mucilage, right? And so the fiber is food for them as well. So it's going to give them energy. So I am totally against wildcrafting native species of Opuntia. They're so easy to propagate. And, the native species that grow here, they're not ideal. I wouldn't want to eat them because they're densely covered in either glochids or spines. So
Mm.
I would rather have the variety that's easy to grow. And yeah, I don't know what species mine is. I've never keyed it out because I feel like I'm gone in spring a lot. So it's hard for me to catch it.
Totally. Yeah. Because you got to key it out by their flower, I take it.
By the flower, yeah.
What,
And then they
no, go
hybridize.
for it.
I'm like, ugh.
Right. What botanical key are you using down there?
I use the Desert Jepson manual.
Yeah, that's right. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing a bit about your abuela. Yeah, I've always been, fascinated hearing the stories that you tell about her and all that. So, kind of moving forward a little bit, when did you really start getting gung ho about herbalism and decide to kind of make it your career?
Yeah. So I've been to 3 different schools. I've studied at
Mhm.
3 different schools. And my second school with Julie James at Green Wisdom Herbal Studies,
I love
I,
Julie.
I love Julie too. She's amazing. So Julie really, she's such a good teacher and she's so passionate. And I just see like where I live, there's not enough education now because so many folks are moving up here. There are more people that are hosting herbalism workshops and so forth. So, but for a while I was like the only one doing it up here. And I just felt like we need to let people know that we don't need to rely upon drugs, medication to treat something
Yeah,
when we could do it naturally with food
yeah,
and plants for medicine and so forth. And it also changing our diet. So I really wanted to teach folks that. I never really got into making the products and stuff. I'm not a product person. I can make them
yeah,
and I have made them, but I just rather teach and
yeah.
work in that way. Uh, and then I went to Columbines, and that's where I kind of had like the aha moment where I was no longer really interested in herbalism. I was more interested in ecology and studying the plants. So it got to a point where, you know, I really was not interested in what can this plant do for me
Yeah.
and how can it work? I got into more fascination with like the pollinators that pollinate the plant and the different characteristics of the plant that make that unique for that species
Mm.
and how it has an impact on the ecosystem. And so I was more involved into wanting to learn more about the species and rather than like how can I use them with herbalism.
Hey everyone, it's Mason. Just a quick interruption from the show to let you know about our 13 herbal freebies. If you go to herbrally.com, on the navigation bar at the top of the page, you'll see a button that says freebies. Just click there and you'll sign up for our email newsletter. And in exchange, we're offering 13 herbal freebies. That's ebooks, webinars, videos, downloadable audio, and discounts to cool herbal companies. So if you'd like to check out these freebies as well as sign up for our email newsletter, we update you about current events, new monographs, new videos, etc. Just go to herbrelly.com and click on the button at the top of the page that simply says freebies. Okay, that's it from me. Now back to the show. Sure. What kind of work do you do in the ecology realm?
Well, I'm actually a botanist, not an ecologist, but
Oh,
you do,
gotcha.
yeah, you do have to study. You while you're in the field, you get to learn, about you're studying ecology
Sure, yeah.
essentially, right? And so what I do is I've worked with different agencies and I've helped with monitoring post-fire monitoring with restoration projects. I worked with SEMA dome restoration, um, doing a project where we were basically seed collecting of the eastern Joshua tree and the western Joshua tree,
Hmm.
and doing conservation work in processing the fruits, working it with a seed bank, harvesting the fruits and so forth. So I've done that. We've done restoration where we plant them and, monitoring post-fire, the impacts of what fire has on an ecosystem and monitoring what plants come back and what plants don't come back. Rare plant monitoring as well is something that I do in the spring because that's when it's coming up. So where we're monitoring rare species. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Well, fast forwarding a little bit, now you have I want to say it's your umbrella business called Every Leaf Speaks. That's where you host your Airbnb experiences. Also, Every Leaf Speaks botanical studies, all the classes you teach and whatnot. I've just always been curious, what is the meaning behind the name Every Leaf Speaks?
Well, it's yeah, the meaning of it for me was when you think about plants, they speak to us, and I'm not talking about you know, I'm not talking about meditating with the plant and it actually speaks to you. I'm actually saying that plants do talk to us. We need to listen. They're always talking to us. And it's about pausing and listening. And for me, I've always been an advocate, like for conservation work and protecting biodiversity. For me, I just felt like what we're seeing in today's times where people are just scraping the earth, getting, a lot of rare plants and endemic flora are impacted by this. They are the voiceless and we need to be their voice. And so for me, Every Leaf Speaks was just something I made up like in 2016, I believe. And it's just me kind of speaking that every leaf does speak. We just have to listen to it and be its voice.
Well, I asked Amanda before we jumped on the call what she thought it meant, and I would say she's spot on. So very cool. And I don't really think of Christina Sanchez as much of a hippie person, but that's a pretty hippie meaning behind it. So I really dig it. Awesome. Well, also, when I also think of you, I think of someone who's really fond of the desert ecology. And me personally, growing up in the Western Cascades, Eugene, Oregon, I like a wet old growth forest, and I've never really been too drawn to the desert, but I think maybe eventually I would be, especially if I spent more time there, because I think if you spend time of it, you grow an appreciation for it and see the beauty in it. Just what personally draws you to desert ecology?
Well, one, I'm from the desert.
Right.
So for me, the desert, I love the open landscape. When I was in Columbines and we were studying the old growth forest, I felt claustrophobic. I didn't like that. For me, I like just the open skies, and I love just to see the plains and the mountains. And for me, I love that part of the desert. But what I love the most is how unique these species are. These immobile organisms that the plants I'm speaking about, but they can't just pick up and leave when things get too tough, right? They learn to adapt. So I'm really I love plant adaptation and also how animals adapt to the habitat. But with the changing climate, we're seeing that a lot of these species can't survive. A lot of them are dying. They're not reproducing. So for me, I just find it. I'm just enamored by the beauty. One, people think that the desert is bleak and barren, but it's so diverse with life. Just the different types of species, all the various ecosystems that occur here. I love it. And I love the smells. Everybody talks about creosote bush, after a rain, how it emits the aromatic terpenes that are drifted with the wind. Yeah, La Rea smells amazing, but there's different wherever you go. If I'm in a marshy area and there's Anamopsis californica, which is yerba mansa, that has an amazing fragrance smell. If I'm in the higher desert foothill mountains, then I'm going to start to smell pinyon pines and juniper. And it just different times, even in the summer when the resins warm up from the pinyon, it wafts in the air and there's so many different plants, and then you get the petrichor after a rain and just like, oh God, I love the desert. I love the plants. I love it here.
What was that last word you said? Petra something? I don't know that one.
So it's basically a time when there's a expanse of dryness
Mm.
and you get this like downpour of a good rain, like a good decent rain, and the soil just emits these aromatics that just come out in the wind. I mean, well, drifted in the wind. Or just like you walk outside your door and it smells. That is what is called petrichor, when we basically have this expanse of time when there is no precipitation, and when you have like a good rain event, it just it just emits this amazing fragrance.
Can you tell us a little bit about your love of Joshua Tree? You've done a lot of work, helping preserve Joshua trees. And I guess before we get into that, can you just tell the audience, like, what is a Joshua tree and maybe a little bit about the plant, the ecology, and so on?
So Joshua tree, there's two species of Joshua trees, Yucca shedigra, I'm sorry, that's Mojave Yucca, I'm sorry, Yucca brevifolia, which is a Western Joshua tree, Yucca yagriana, which is an Eastern Joshua tree. They grow in different ecosystems within the Mojave Desert. They only occur here. There are species they're going to be moved into Agaveaceae, or actually they're currently in the agave family, but they're going to be moved into the asparagus family. It hasn't been published. I haven't seen anywhere yet. Anyway, so they're not true trees. They're actually like these big kind of succulent-like plants that have a tree-like form that are arborescent. The thing that makes them so unique is that they have an obligate pollinator. So, when they do flower, they might have other pollinators that come by and visit, but those pollinators are not adapted with the tools per se to pollinate that flower. So they have an obligate pollinator with the yucca moth. In fact, all species within the genus Yucca have an obligate pollinator, which is going to be a yucca moth. So in exchange for pollination, the yucca plant will let the yucca moth, basically when she inserts her eggs into the flower, the ovary, through the stigma canal, in exchange for pollination, the plant will allow the larva to basically, eat the seeds. And that's, and as she's actively laying her eggs in there, she's actually actively pollinating the flower at the same time. So without the yucca moth, we're not going to have any type of, yucca plants happening. So that's what makes it so unique. And their distribution range is actually shrinking. We're seeing a big impact from, the increased aridity and also the increase in temperatures too. There was a climate scientists have predicted by like 2100, we're going to lose about 90% of the Joshua trees. And this is for the Western Joshua tree, but also the Eastern species is also impacted. And that study was done in the Joshua Tree National Park. So we're seeing that actually the species that are occurring at low elevation are dying. They're not reproducing by flower. And they're also found another study where the male yucca moths at low elevation are becoming sterile. So there's no reproduction within the moths, the yucca moths, which are not going to help pollinate the flowers. So unfortunately, they're dying at low elevation. And from the when we've gone out and monitored the Joshua trees for studies in the Joshua Tree National Park for climate change research, we don't see very many recruitment. We don't see new, because Joshua trees can also reproduce from the root system. So we don't see any, genetically identical clones. So we're actually seeing where they're moving to higher elevation. And then there's a whole discussion about, can the yucca moth survive at higher elevation?
Interesting. So 90% potentially could be gone by the year 2100. Is any part of you optimistic with through the work you're doing and spearheading to prevent that from happening, or is this kind of just like a done deal?
Well, I mean, if everybody continues as business as usual, we really need to mitigate our what we contribute towards climate change. So I've participated in like when I was working at the Mojave National Preserve, uh, before I was even working there, I was part of the SEMA Dome restoration, which is open from October to November to volunteers to the public. And so my friends and I would go there every year and we would plant baby juvenile Eastern Joshua trees, the Yucca yagrianas. We would plant them for post-fire restoration of this massive fire that occurred on SEMA Dome, which was basically it was one of the densest populations of Eastern Joshua trees. And it was considered to be a climate refugia because it was at higher elevation. So it was cooler. It got a little bit more precipitation in forms of snow and rain. But we're seeing that is like it's drying up too there as well. But so, I'm optimistic. I want to be optimistic, all the restoration work that we've done by planting Joshua trees. But this last summer, I was doing a lot of where I would go and monitor the plants that had been planted in 21 and 22 to record the status. And unfortunately, what I found a lot was that the rodents are going in and basically removing the entire plant, or the plant dies because it's just too dry. There is a watering project that they're going to launch hopefully soon where the volunteers can go and get pinpoints on an app and they'll go find where the Joshua trees and water them. But this is something that even when I worked there, we would go out and water the Joshua trees that have been planted for restoration projects. But yes, it's tough out there. And I want to say, like, I am optimistic, but if we don't change our ways and if we don't continue to have these restoration projects, I think we're definitely going to lose a species. We're losing them at low elevation as it is now.
So Western Joshua tree is Yucca brevifolia. Did I get that right? And then what's the Eastern species?
Yucca yagriana.
Yagriana. And does the Eastern species also get pollinated by the yucca
Yes.
moth?
They have
Okay.
a different species of yucca moth, but yeah, that's what, and they're, when you look at them, compare them side by side, you can tell the differences, the leaf length, the shape of the yucca yagriana looks a little bit more shrubby.
Yeah.
They start to have branches out like closer to the base. They look more like a little, shrub, like a shrub, whereas Joshua trees, the Western one some of them are like towering, they look like trees, but and the leaves are much longer, but yeah, they're definitely
What was that word you used? Was it arborescent? Does that mean tree-like?
tree-like.
Gotcha. So I'm going to do a screen share with you, and I'm going to show something you posted on your Instagram page. And so if you're just listening on the audio version, you can check it out on the YouTube version of this chat. But just kind of curious if you could kind of explain what's going on here. Here we go. You see that?
Yeah, okay. So this is in the field in the Joshua Tree National Park, and we've recently have had a lot of rain with the atmospheric rivers that have been happening. There's been a lot of rain, and what happens is it softens up the soil, it loosens up the soil, and then we've been having these high winds with the rains. We've been having windstorm or storm warnings for many weeks off and on. So this is a recent Joshua tree that has fallen. This is the Western Joshua tree, Yucca brevifolia. And my guess is that if you could see there, the leaves are still green. It was freshly fallen. When I touched the soil, it felt damp. So from gauging with experience in this, that this just got, the soil just was so soft because of all the rain, it got loosened up. And then with the winds, it topped over because in the direction of where it fell is also where the winds were. So like what it was blowing out towards the east on this side where it happens most of. And another thing, if you look at the root system there, Joshua trees don't have a taproot system. They have these lateral root systems, and they do go down as well, but they have these extending lateral root systems that I always explain that look like little udon noodles.
Mm,
And so they don't, they can anchor themselves and they could sustain some high winds. But if you've got just a downpour of rain where the soil is very damp and then you get these high winds, it'll topple over. And this one's a goner. Some of the
yeah.
roots are still in the soil. So I've seen a lot. I always tell people that down doesn't mean dead. You can
Mm.
certainly have Joshua trees that can still be partially rooted and still survive. And if that's the case and it's your property, I would say add some soil, try to keep those roots covered. Maybe they can be encouraged to go, back into the earth again. But unfortunately, this would probably most likely die.
Is a lot of the reason we're losing Joshua trees because people buying properties and then just like cutting them down so they could build buildings and homes and whatnot?
Well, a lot of it has to do, unfortunately, with and I know people might not understand this, but a lot of the Joshua trees that have been scraped, both the eastern and the western, has been due to renewable energy, solar, and those big wind farms.
Oh,
When
wow.
So a lot, yeah, there's projects that were approved by the California Fish and Game to proceed, and there was like 500 Joshua trees on some of these plots. So for decades, it has just been like normal procedure to scrape the desert to, and make these Joshua Tree woodland, to make these solar farms. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, you're killing these species that only grow. It's what we call endemic. They only grow here in the Mojave Desert. They're a keystone species, which is so essential to with the whole ecosystem. We have insects that rely on it, animals that rely on it for food and shelter. We have the desert tortoise that it's their habitat, kit foxes, burrowing owls. So you have all these like species that live within the Joshua Tree woodland, and then you go scrape it, you're
Yeah.
killing the ecosystem, which means you're impacting the other species as well. So solar farm, renewable energy has been a big deal for a long time, as well as, yeah, you get into the cities. If you drive to the town of Yucca Valley, if you're ever in the Mojave Desert, Morongo Basin, there are some areas off Kickapoo. Just take a drive off Kickapoo and you'll see like there is dense Joshua tree populations, and then you see different areas where the land's been scraped to
Yeah.
build these ugly homes. And so, I mean, people have to live, right? But we
Right.
can be sustainable in how we develop land.
Yeah.
The town of Yucca Valley was against the petition. I should say that the Western Joshua tree is now a protected species. There is a Governor Newsom passed legislation last July called the Western Joshua Tree Conservation Act. Prior to that, since 2020, actually before that, we have been fighting to get the species listed under the California Endangered Species Act. That was a battle. And then Governor Newsom passed this legislation. So now they are protected. But unfortunately, people were scraping the land to build homes, to build resorts, to build strip malls and Home Depot and Walmarts and so forth. So that's been one of so the threats against Joshua Tree is primarily climate change.
Yeah.
Second is wildfires and climate-induced wildfire. And then you have human activities like scraping the land for development. So that has been a big threat to Joshua trees.
Is there any other updates or things you'd like to share, maybe with the audience, how folks can support you in your work regarding Joshua trees, or just, kind of, because there's other topics I definitely want to go over with you as well, but just anything else you'd like to share regarding your work with Joshua trees?
Yeah, so there is a documentary that'll be coming out soon. It's not, you can see the trailer. It's called I Thought They Were Protected. It's a documentary that is showing what I've been talking about. It's involving both the Eastern and Western Joshua tree. I suggest everybody go see that. Joshua trees are not protected. The Eastern Joshua tree is not protected in Nevada, Utah, or Arizona because they grow in the Mojave in Eastern, in those Eastern part of the state. So I would suggest, if you could write letters. There is organizations and nonprofits that work towards conservation, like the Friends of the Arizona Joshua Tree Forest. They're an organization out of Meadview, Arizona, which has got a beautiful dense forest on BLM land. They can use donations because of all the work that they do. And I would say they are protected here in California now, thank goodness. But I would say just support your local organizations that are working, conservation organizations. I would say support here. We got Mojave Desert Land Trust, which is a nonprofit that does a lot of conservation and acquiring land as well and protecting it. So support organizations like that. I'm on the board for the California Native Plant Society Mojave Desert chapter. Donate towards us because we're working towards conservation as well for the land.
Great tips. When and where can folks watch that documentary?
So if you just go online, it's I thought they were protected, I think.com. If you just Googled it, I'm not too sure. It's on Vimeo, that
Oh,
website. So
it's
they can
called I Thought They Were Protected.
I thought they were protected
Oh.
because when we were tabling for during the whole, like we were actively going to fish and game meetings
Mm.
and online or in person once the COVID restrictions were released. But we were tabling at the farmers market in Joshua Tree, talking to the public because a lot of public don't know about what's going on. And so one of the most repeated phrases we heard was, I thought they were already protected. So my
Mm,
friend named the documentary based on that. And I'm in there. You can see me
that's
rallying,
cool.
the host
Of
of rallies and
course.
yeah,
It's an herb rally. Well, it's a tree rally.
tree rally.
Uh, awesome. Well, you mentioned uh, the tortoise, and you also posted about that on your Instagram. I'm going to share the screen again here. Here we go. So, 1 second. We'll edit out this nonsense. I was just hoping you could teach us a little bit about this tortoise. What a beautiful animal. You certainly don't see this in Oregon or Wisconsin.
No, look at them.
I know, that's awesome. So they live in the Joshua trees, yeah?
Well, not in the Joshua trees, but the Joshua tree woodland is one of their habitats. I mean, they occur all over in
Yeah.
crucial scrub. So that they don't only occur in the Mojave Desert. Um, there's so right now, so they go into like hibernation, which is called brumation,
Mm.
and they basically will conserve their energy and their resources until the time is right and it's emerging. So here we're at about middle elevation, and I was surprised to see this tortoise and this big fella, and he was actually hiking on the trail. It was hiking on the trail. It was really cute. He was like minding it, I'm following the trail. It just was walking along, didn't care about us.
Yeah.
And so this is the time of year where they're reawakening and they're looking for wildflowers. That's why don't pick the wildflowers because animals rely on them for food. And so anyway, but the tortoise, they're really unique because uh, unfortunately, a lot of them get ran over. And what I find interesting about them is during a rain or like after a rain, tortoises will go migrate towards the roads because that's where they're going to get most of this like runoff of the water. And so you'll find them walking across the road, and a lot of them unfortunately are killed. They get ran over. There is one, if you go to the Joshua Tree National Park, is Joshua Tree NPS web's Instagram. Recently, they posted about Rocky, this tortoise that was ran over and survived last year.
Wow.
And so he's a lucky one. They named him Rocky Balboa because he's a tough, but a lot of them don't survive and they become they're dead. And also a lot of predation happens because of the ravens will, be looking for the babies. This older tortoise here can survive being picked at by ravens. They won't even go for the mature older tortoises. I'll go after the juveniles. One thing about tortoises is there's this slogan now for the Mojave Preserve called "Drive like a tortoise." When you're in desert
Mm.
habitat, yeah, you wanna drive slow because a lot of them are getting ran over. You also want to stay on the road, the pull out parts for parking. I see people making their own parking spaces here in the park or in the desert, which is bad because a lot of these tortoises will be hiding near the shrubs or they'll be hanging out there and you don't see them sometimes.
Yeah.
They sometimes can see camouflage with the soil, but other information about it is, you don't want to pick up a tortoise. What they have this reaction where they will vacate the bladder. And when they do that, if they don't get to a water source soon enough,
Oh,
they're going to die of dehydration. So one of the ways that tortoises can survive periods and months without water is that they conserve water basically in their hydration in their bladder. And if they get picked up or spooked, you know,
Whoa.
yeah, if you spook them, they will vacate. And if they don't get to a water source right away, they'll die. So I wouldn't I would leave one alone. I mean, I know I look kind of close to this, but I zoomed in on the video to film
Yeah.
this. So I kind of keep my distance from them. I would never pick one up because I don't want it to vacate. In the instance that's a tortoise has to be assisted, if it's, if you see a tortoise trying to cross the road, watch it, look out for traffic. I get out and look for traffic. I don't pick a tortoise up. And if I see traffic, I'll put my hands up, letting people know stop, and I'll point to the ground, and
Mm.
they could appreciate it. And I'll basically watch the tortoise get there. But if it's dangerous and I gotta assist it, I will pick it up about a foot off the ground and carry it in the direction of which it's going, and I'll walk it off the road so that way it doesn't come back on. And then I always keep extra water on me. And I'll just dig like a little cat hole, fill it up with some water, and see if the tortoise will drink. I hang out with them and make sure that they'll drink some water.
It's a great public service announcement. I never would have thought I probably wouldn't pick it up anyways, but if you're tempted to, yeah,
Always
you're basically, yeah, that's a great tip right there. Awesome. Let me switch over here. So, any idea how old that tortoise might have been based on its
Oh
size?
man, big. I'm not a wildlife biologist, but I would say it's over 15 years old. It's pretty old. They can
Wow.
live up to be 80 years old.
Wow. What an
Mhm.
amazing creature.
I
I've
know.
had, I've had too many interactions with tortoises or turtles over the years, but yeah, fascinating. So, speaking of animals, I know you're also a huge advocate for rescuing cats, helping them out. And I actually was scrolling through your Instagram and I saw that you recently taught a class on how to make your own cat food. You
Mhm.
could get into that if you want. I've never even considered making my own cat food before, but if you want to briefly go over that, feel free to. Otherwise, just kind of curious if you have any thing you'd like to chat about with your work with rescuing cats.
Yeah. So I just find that I rescue animals, period, cats, road runners. I mean,
Turtles,
tortoise,
tortoises.
whatever. I rescued a Canadian snow goose one year, and he spent the night with me in my rig because I was on my way to a restoration project,
Yeah.
and I had to wait the next day for the wildlife biologist to get there. So I slept in a rig. My friends brought, vegetables so it can eat, and I nursed it back to health. It was a juvenile, and then yeah. So I rescue animals.
Yeah,
But with cats, unfortunately, a lot of folks are dumping animals, dumping cats. They dump dogs too, but a lot of times they're not spaying and neutering them, so they're just reproducing. And unfortunately, a lot of cats end up sick and dying. And so I've done a lot of trap and return where you humanely trap them and then you get them spayed or neutered and you return them to the area that they came from. Some of them I've rescued and I actually fostered, kept one, but he ended up dying. But I still, yeah, at least he got to know what love is, So me, I'm always
sure.
trying to find placement for them. If they're if they're a friendly cat, I actually saved one from the desert. Her name is Grusonia. I name all my kitties after a genus of plants. And so, yeah, so I've done rescue, try to find homes for them. I've done a lot of hoarder cases where we go
Mhm.
in and remove cats from a hoarder case. And unfortunately, I had a bad experience with a local rescue that ended up being a hoarder as well. So we had to pull some cats from them. Um, yeah, it's exhausting work, mentally exhausting, and it's emotional work, but it's rewarding when you see them thrive and get placed in a home. Um, and making your own cat food. So people, I mean, the kibble is just bad for animals, for cats and for dogs as well. It's so easy to make your own cat food, a species appropriate balanced diet. And so the stuff that I do is I have a recipe where I source the organ meat, the protein, the vitamins and supplements, all of that. That takes a long time, but that's my backup plan in case something ever happens. Another thing that I use is a pre-mix, what we call a completer. The company is called No Better Pet Food. I've been using them for over 2 years now. And it's just easy. You just either do raw or cooked. There's directions, and you put the premix in there. You first make like a batter with water, or I like to use broth from the meat, the protein that I cooked it in. So I save like the broth, I defat it, and then I mix it up with the powdered premix, and then pour it over my big bowl of meat that I make, and then just massage it into the meat, bag it up in BPA-free Ziploc freezer bags, and I flatten it out so it'll like lay nicely in the freezer. And so, you know what? Here, I'll show you an example.
Yeah, please.
So I'm getting ready to go on a trip. And so I made about 15 pounds of meat. And so this is what it looks like. And I lay them like this. So yeah, this will feed about, I mean, if you have like one cat, it'll last a long time. But yeah, you don't want to keep the meat more than 3 to 4 days in the fridge when it's cooked, and then raw, you want to feed it within 2 days. So yeah, this is chicken, and it's shredded chicken, and I bought this little tabletop meat grinder that won't take a lot of space in the kitchen, and it's a food processor meat grinder that's dedicated specifically to grind the meat. And one thing I've noticed is the cats are not fat. The cats are healthy. When you look at the ingredients in canned cat food, they're putting gums, they're putting starches. Cats are supposed to only eat, in the wild, they're only eating prey, mice and rodents and so forth. So they're not eating kale. I feel like humans think, kale, cheesy goose sounds good for my cat. It's like they don't have the enzyme to digest lactose, or lactose intolerant, in fact. But they can have goat's milk. Goat's milk's okay. But yeah, anyway, so learning about feline nutrition for me has been something that I've been passionate about since I had lost 2 cats due to kidney disease. Because of the food that they were eating, I didn't know any better. And now it's just, I look at feline nutrition and health as the way I would for myself.
I love
and
that.
Working with actually herbs too. There's some herbs that they can have. And so, I use like slippery, I know we're not supposed to use slippery elm, but I have slippery elm. Sorry, that's Malacina. She's very talkative. I use slippery elm occasionally to treat IBD, or marshmallow root for upper respiratory, dry nose, and so forth. And yeah, I work with different plants, but I've learned, and I'm actually looking for a course that is just specific for cats. Because I want to learn more herbalism for cats. I know it for humans, and if they're sick when they got, if a cat has something wrong with it, I'm like, if you were a human, but I don't know what herbs are safe for animals. Not all yet, but I'm learning.
That would be a great class to teach for you, is herbalism for cats or pets.
Yeah.
Do you find that they like the flavor compared to, say, like the store-bought canned stuff?
Yeah, there's some, I have a picky eater, and so I found what things he does like, and what proteins they don't like. And I don't know, I didn't have a problem switching these cats over. I just have one boy that his name's Oplopanix. You'll know that one from Pacific Northwest.
That's right. Thumbs Club.
Yeah. Little Oplo is his nickname. Oplo is just kind of picky. He likes his shredded chicken, and he likes his raw beef. If I try to do turkey, he's like, eh.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just have to experiment. And I taught a DIY cat food workshop for a fundraiser that I did for Save the Meows Cat Lounge here in Yucca Valley. So it was to benefit all the wonderful work that they do, and at their cafe, rescuing cats that are on euthanasia list from shelters, and they get them placed into wonderful homes after they've been vetted. So wonderful organization that I've been helping out with and working with. And yeah, so I if anybody's interested, I could send you a video. You can hit me up at everlyspeaks.cs@gmail.com, and I can email you a video that we recorded so you can learn how to make your own cat food. It's very easy. And the cats, do love it. I make them a nice, because cats don't drink a lot of water. You can have water bowls and they seem to be full all the time. Um, and even when you have those cat fountains, I feel like they are not drinking enough water, but I get them to drink more water because I save when I make big pots in the Instant Pot of chicken. I defat the broth and I save that.
Mm,
I call it meat broth, and pour it off, and I add broth to their food, and especially if it's smelly, they love the smell, so they
totally.
just lap it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely do email Christina if you like that video. And Christina, if you want, we could include a link in the podcast show notes to the video too, if you want.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. One more cat question. Then we can move. We're big cat people. We have 3 cats. We're actually watching an extra cat, so we have 4 cats in the house right now. But do you know if it's healthy for them or okay for them to have like egg yolks? For some reason, I feel like that would be a good idea, but maybe not. Hi, which one's that? Oh,
Smilacina.
hi, Smilacina. Oh my God, so beautiful.
Nation. So egg yolk is okay. You just got to make sure you get the egg white completely off.
Totally.
Um, an egg yolk, you can do a quarter teaspoon of just raw egg yolk for hairballs. So this is a thing. That hairball crap, if you look at some of the ingredients, it has crap that they don't need. I've seen like mouth Drexin, I've seen corn syrup. I mean, and this is what vets tell us to give our cats. It's wrong.
Yeah.
So I found there's a feline nutrition website. When I started my journey down this, it's called Feline Nutrition, but they've changed. They do still have the Facebook page, but I think it's called Hair-Today, HARE. They still have a lot of the archives of the information I learned when I first started my journey, but I've learned just from them how to make cat food, and I've learned from different websites like IBD, raw meat, raw feeding for IBD cats. These forums I've been on, I've just learned how to use food to help them, and it's wonderful. Like I give them a quarter teaspoon of coconut oil for hairballs as well. So
Hmm.
you can do things and not give them high blood pressure or it affect them in different ways, or give, a lot of stuff will put weight on them. So yeah, there's actually a doctor named Dr. Andrew Jones, Veterinary
Hmm.
Secrets. I follow him. The natural pet doctor, I like her. And then Dr. Judy Morgan is another one that I like.
We were watching this guy called the Cat Whisperer, I want to say his name was, on YouTube for a little bit. He had a lot of great stuff. But besides that, since this is an herbalism show, I don't know if you know about Rita Hogan, but she's called the Canine Herbalist, and I want to say she just wrote a book by the same name, the Canine Herbalist. So definitely worth looking or checking out as far as like herbalism for your pets. I know she also dabbles a little bit in feline care as well. So that's canineherbalist.com. Are you aware of Rita's work, Christina?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I don't have a dog.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I
No,
think
I'm always a proponent for that.
yeah, exactly. Well, very cool. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I just love hearing about all the different work you're doing. You're saving the trees, you're saving the animals. You got a big heart, Christina. So it's always very inspiring to hear what you're up to and see where you're up to. And for the listener, if you want to check out Christina's work, you can go to everyleafspeaks.com. I'm sorry, everyleafspeaks.org. Yeah. ORG, and also at Every Leaf Speaks on Instagram. But that's not the end of the show. I don't want to make it feel like we're wrapping up here. Still a few more questions, because I do think it would be valuable for you to kind of explain your experience doing this whole Airbnb experience where you lead plant walks for folks. I think that's such an innovative way to make money as an herbalist. So do you recommend it for folks to give it a try, and maybe some of the pros and cons for leading those workshops through Airbnb?
Yeah, so that certainly, you could see if your area, they'll put Airbnb will actually put caps on an area, like they put one
Mm,
for our region here. So there cannot be any new experiences.
interesting.
People host everything from, and it's kind of redundant. I'm sorry, there's just so many like singing bowl things
Sure, yeah. Especially in your area, I bet.
going on, like the hundredth one. But they do Jeep rides, so people can take people out on hikes, go on rock climbing, bouldering. So if you have a service or you have a knowledge, experience of expertise in something, you can host these experiences through Airbnb. And if you live in an area where there is a place called Auto Camp, they're popping up in different locations now. You can also get on board with them because they have something similar to the Airbnb experiences. It's just called Way Experience. And yeah, I do suggest if you're an herbalist and yeah, definitely do it. Host workshops. It's I've been doing this since 2019 and before the pandemic. And so it's been really great. I've met a lot of great people. I've been able to engage with amazing folks and folks that have experience in herbalism
Mm.
and folks that are actually naturalists or they're biologists and botanists that want to come out and learn about this area. So it's nice to share, for me personally, to share my knowledge and my experience as I'm also a California naturalist, but we focus more on desert and sky islands here in the area. So it's nice for me to be able to share my information and my knowledge, especially with my experience working in restoration and all the assistance I've done for climate change research. So it's like people are viewing the desert through my lens. And
Yeah.
if you have that kind of, experience behind you, expertise, I say go do it. There are some folks, unfortunately, that have asked me about wildcrafting. And I
Mm.
don't, I definitely like the desert doesn't recover like it would in the Pacific Northwest, like
Right.
it may not grow for decades.
Right.
So I teach more about not how to have like to fight plant lust and to more why we should be cultivating native species if we want to use them for medicinal purposes, rather than go and impact an ecosystem and wildcraft it.
How's the money side of things? You don't have to like give any numbers, but does Airbnb take a sizable cut, or can you
Yeah.
speak to that at all?
Yeah, currently they're taking 20%.
Okay.
And so just raise your costs a little bit more.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah, good call. Yeah, you're getting
So,
clients through it, and you're also bringing awareness, I would imagine, to Every Leaf Speaks and all that.
yeah, no, I definitely, people are awesome. I've had one experience with the naturopath.
Oh, right. Okay.
She was a thorn in everybody's side.
Mm.
But somebody that wanted a wildcraft and was upset because I wouldn't let her pick plants.
Oh,
And
well,
so yeah, unfortunately there's those kind of people. But other
yeah,
than that,
sure.
it's just an amazing experience for me because I meet awesome people,
Yeah,
folks that, we keep in communication, so you build almost like this rapport with people and make friendships with some of these
that's
folks.
cool.
But you get like-minded people. So that's what's amazing is that you get folks that are interested in what you're offering. So you're going to mesh. Well, usually you do. You're just going to kick it off and just it's exciting to see how excited they get about learning new things.
I love that there's so many different activities you could do on Airbnb too. It doesn't have to be herbalism. It could be kind of peripherally related. And just as an aside, I have a good friend and he lives in New Orleans and he knows a lot about graffiti. And every time I go down there, he takes me almost on like these graffiti tours. And I was like, shit, you should, start an Airbnb experience with this. And he said that there's a lot of anonymity and privacy that goes along with the graffiti culture, so it probably
Okay.
would be a good idea to expose certain things like that. But it was really fascinating, and yeah, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself to just say herbalism. If you have other random skills, it could be
Yeah.
something worth looking into to get a little side hustle money going. But
Oh yeah.
awesome. Well, yeah, I don't know if you have any couple more minutes.
Mhm.
Just do you have a general advice for say like the budding herbalist looking to make this their career?
Yeah. I would say one, get yourself, unfortunately, you have to be and have a social media presence. That's how we make our money. And I've been bad about it recently, especially when I'm in the field in the spring and I just it's hard for me to always be updating. But yeah, definitely posting on. I don't do TikTok. I know I should. I just don't do it. I can't get into that. But yeah,
Same.
people that do like TikTok and was that there's so many new social media outlets that you just put your presence out there and take like a social media course if you can, marketing course, I
Hmm.
should say that would be good. There's free ones online. You could research it online as well, like how should a business start up. Basically, you do want to have a social media presence. You want to have a website. And you want to engage. If you're offering herbalism classes, I would say make posters and flyers and put yourself out there. For me, what I started out doing was teaching workshops at Cactus Mart. And, I would make flyers and I would post them up, these billboard areas that they allow us to post up on. And that's how I started to get a lot of people interested by putting flyers in the health food store and talking to folks. And also, Facebook was really big back then and in Instagram. And so once I reached like the local community, word of mouth started speaking and I was able to pick up more folks. So be involved in community, go to your local herb shops, your local health food stores. Ask them if they will host workshops and, go to your local nursery and say like, hey, I would like to do a plant walk here at your nursery, a native plant walk or like just a medicinal plant walk, and one, help you sell plants, and two, I could teach and educate people about this and how, so if you've got that kind of skill, I would say start with your community and then you'll see how, I get nurseries that are not even in my county, not even in my region, that are asking me to go teach with them. And that's great, and so it's definitely social media is the way to do it.
Good
And
tip.
be on top of it. Be on top of it. And don't stop your own education. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly taking classes. And I'm going to this is not herbalism, but I'm going to be taking a bryophyte workshop in Arizona coming up this next week. So I've been gearing up for that big trip. So my education continues. I'm constantly learning because we never stop learning.
That's right. I want to say I heard Jim McDonald say sometimes his favorite classes are to teach are to the newbie people at like say the local gardening club or whatever. Like not the people that are super hardcore into herbalism, but the people that are just kind of like on the fringes and stuff. So that's a great tip. Develop your local community and also your online presence as well. And again, that's at Every Leaf Speaks on Instagram for Christina. Yeah, awesome. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks again for coming on the show, Christina. This has been a long time coming. This will be like episode 120. I feel like you should have been one of the earlier on ones, but when we stopped in California, we did that little Ask an Herbalist session with you, and that was super fun as well. But any closing thoughts before we wrap up and get out of here?
Yeah. So if you're in the desert, one thing to be mindful of is we humans, we are dispersers, unfortunately, unintentionally, of invasive seeds. And so try to stay in parking lot areas. Unfortunately, what we find is that there's a lot of invasive plants that are occurring in most populated areas and trailheads. And so try to stay on the roads. Don't drive off road because you might be unintentionally picking up seeds on your tires. And then when we're hiking off in the desert, when you're leaving the trail, it's always good to dust your clothing off, take off your shoes, kick them off, because there can be little seeds. I always find erodium seeds in my hiking boots, the red stem filiary. I always find seeds like caught in my clothing, or I get the fruiting parts of the bromus, the red brome, I should say. So clean yourself off because you don't want to help disperse these, because those invasive plants are displacing native vegetation, which displaces annuals as well, which is the food source for native fauna. And the fauna don't feed off of the invasive species because they don't provide any nutritional value. So just learn your invasive plants. If you're in California, get familiar with California Invasive Plant Council. I'm wearing their shirt. And and get familiar with invasives and see how you could join local organizations. They call them Weed Warrior, or how to get on teams to help remove invasive plants. Thank you.
I love that. And I want to say I before the call, I was on your Instagram and I saw that was one of your latest posts. As you said, spent the day at Anza Borrego Desert, geeking out on emerging annuals and blooming perennials. There was a consistent theme: invasive plants. And that's basically kind of encompasses what you were just talking about right there. And yeah, that is a dope shirt you're wearing. I was kind of hoping you would wear your awesome Cactus Mart shirt, but yeah, that's a good substitute right
That's
there.
dirty.
Okay, that's
I got
fair.
paid on it. But this is
Well,
the Invasive Plants Council 30th anniversary shirt that one of the conferences I went to. So they're a cool
awesome.
organization, nonprofit.
You also brought up Native Plant Society a couple times, and back when I was in Eugene, I was a part of the Native Plant Society Oregon Emerald chapter, and that's another maybe overlooked thing in the herbal community is joining your local Native Plant Society. I learned a lot when I was there, and you also get to nerd out with other fellow plant people, and then you could also join the Mycology Society, and yeah, there's just tons of fabulous people. So I don't know if you have any more responses to that, but otherwise we could wrap up.
No, but support your local your Native Plant Society. They're nonprofits, and they basically help conserve biodiversity. So it's by your donation of the membership here in California, it's 25, the starting rate. It's cheap annually. And then find your local chapter, and they have plant walks, they have, lectures, presentations on Zoom and in person. And so it's a good opportunity to get to know your local environment, and then outreach with other organizations. Like what I'm doing is through the California Native Plant Society for this workshop. And so I've been to several workshops with CNPS, and it's great. It's really great. One, it increases your knowledge.
Love it. And you have so much knowledge to share, Christina. Thank you so much for coming on the Herbalist Hour. That's going to do it for this episode, and we'll see y'all in the next episode. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Herb Rally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at Herb Rally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from Herb Rally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.